Hi there. Welcome to our tutorial on Microsoft SQL Server. Module 1 SQL Server Architecture. So if you are new to SQL Server, you might be asking what it exactly SQL Server and what it does. Microsoft SQL Server is an RDBMS or Relational Database Management System. It's available in the market just like competitors such as IBM DB2, Oracle and others. And these are the main purpose of our database system. Data storage, meaning that SQL Server will be capable of storing large amounts of critical data on tables. Security, data protection is always a priority. And data must be accessed on tables, so security is always a concern. The backup ability, one of the core foundations on any database system's performance. Data not only should be set, but it should be done also in a very fast manner. And scalability, which is the capacity to software has to adapt itself to new workloads and absorb new features and components. Now imagine you have a business. Maybe a small retail store. Your application uses .NET or Java languages. And require access to data there are on tables. To perform basic operations. This is where SQL Server comes in. And this scenario, you will need a Windows server to host SQL Server instance. There's a copy of the secret service software, which will finally contain databases weighted tables are. This is a very simple example without any complexity. But it's just to give you an idea of how SQL Server works. Now on this scenario, if that's a little bit of complexity to the scheme. Here we have a high availability solutions such as failover closer me on two notes that our troops are different servers. Where we may also have other solutions such as log shipping, database mirroring or replication. Again, it is just to provide you an overview of the product capabilities. This is your example, there are many others. Microsoft SQL Server uses the Transact SQL as the primary language, which is a variation of the original stricter query language created by IBM. Well, this course we not cover clearing techniques. It is good at least to be aware of the major aspects of the SQL. The DML represents data manipulation language composed with select, insert, delete and update statements. And we have the data definition language for creating out to or moving objects. The data controlling, which used to grant or deny permissions to login users. And finally, transaction control language, which are the famous commit and rollback statements that controls the results of the transaction. Then, these are some examples of the main objects in a SQL Server instance. We have systems and user tables, systems and user databases, logins, roles, server or database level schemas, and stored procedures, view, trigger and indexes. These are some of the most important tools used by the Secret Service DBA on a daily basis. So we have a SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Configuration Manager, Event Viewer, Remote Desktop Connection, Performance Monitor and the Windows PowerShell. These are just some examples. There are more tools depending on the industry you're working on or the type of your company, for example, as you may have third-party softwares. Let's take a look now at the basic life cycle of a query in SQL Server. Breaking Bad fence, we certainly recognize this guy here. He will represent our end user. So this user has access to a device. That could be a computer or smartphone. And browse. And only in store for tablets and apply filter that he wants the lowest price first. And then the result is displayed back to user. And he can apply the decision to buy or not a product. This is a very simple example. And now we're going to see what actually happens behind the scenes inside a SQL Server instructor. So this is the SQL Server query lifecycle from an internal SQL Server perspective. Here we have our end user application. And select statement to browse data. A command then will be encapsulated in some sort of package and route to reverse in some layers, and you did reaches the SQL Server. It reaches the operating system. This gave the Windows Server pass through network firewall and a SQL Server network interface using TCP/IP. So become one finally reach a SQL Server before DAD uses. Yes, just table a data stream, a protocol that interacts with database server. So once it has reached a SQL server, goes to command parser. The command parser will make sure there are no adverse into code such as an additional comma or missing object. And it would check. This object already exists like a table or index. One is once it finishes this, it comes the access method, which is a collection of code responsible for data retrieval. The access method would check for an existing query plan, and to do this, it has to go to a memory using the buffer manager that contains the buffer pool, and finally reaches the plan cache. If it finds an existing plan that is this query, it's not a SQL Server because it was executed before. It was headed back to the query optimizer so the plan can be used. It doesn't exist. The query optimizer will have to generate a new one based on statistics and other factors. So once the plan is generated for to query comes the query executor, which name already says what it does. After this, query executor will go again to the access method, so that the required data pages can be read from memory because they are into data cache. So that retrieve it, disk into memory. Or if they are already in memory, they're just but meet. And then the information is sent back to user. Using the same way did it before. There are two main engines in this whole operations. We're going to take a look at those now. So the command parser, query optimizer and executor, these are part of the relational engine. And these other in green, they are part of the storage and next slide's going to see some more details about that. So the relational engine is composed of command parser, query optimizer and executor. Command parser, as I said before, validates the syntax on SQL being passed, meaning that if a query has any ever SQL Server, we abort the whole transaction and would not move forward. The query optimizer plays an important role. It has a duty to generate an efficient, clear plan based on its cost, which may vary according to what information is available for processing, such as a recently updated statistics, and the query executor, which is, the name already says what it does, is responsible for processing the query into CPU itself. So this image shows an example of a graphical representation of a query plan generated by the query optimizer. In summary, these are logical operations. And this storage engine is composed by the access methods, the buffer and transaction manager. The access method is a collection of code for data retrieval, as I said before. Query lifecycle. The buffer manager contains the buffer pool, which is the main memory consumer and also the data and plan caches. In a transaction manager governs the log and lock manager. And these are in summary physical operations. Now you may be asking why we did not use it to lock and unlock manager and the query lifecycle. That was because a query was a simple select statement, so there was no data change at all. Next, we're going to review the definition of another key elements onto the SQL Server internal data pages: write-ahead logging, checkpoint and lazy writer. The data pages are to smallest unit where data is stored in SQL Server. Every database has a fixed size up to 8 bytes. The server maps data pages trick stands, which are collection of 8 contiguous data pages. And extent can be mixed or uniform depending. It belongs to more than one object and a collection of certain number of extent form an allocation bitmaps such as GAM, which is global allocation map. And this image shows the body of a database, where actual rows are kept, as well as some metadata. MAC page header information. The write-ahead logging is a very interesting mechanism. It will ensure that all changes to data pages has an associated record about that change in the transaction log before writing the changed data from memory to disk. This method, it guarantees the durability property of the transactions, which is the ability to undo or roll back, or for any changes for the transactions if necessary. So if write-ahead logging didn't exist, a SQL Server wouldn't be a reliable database platform. And this is another reason why the transaction log is so important. And we will talk more about it in Module 4. The checkpoint set data synchronization mechanism. SQL Server every data page change. It's done in a memory non-directly in disk physical database files are. A SQL Server marks the change in data pages as 30. Flushes them out to disk when the checkpoint occurs. So the information synchronize it wouldn't log in physical files. The checkpoint happens every 1 minute by default, or it can be done manually by simply writing the checkpoint coming. Additionally, we can occur in another circumstances, such as during log backups or doing simple recovery models. The lazy writer plays an essential role and is another mechanism that shows how physical memory is essential to SQL Server operations. It will reviews the last recently use an algorithm to determine when did a page it was last accessed in memory. And depending on the result you can decide to flush the basic gist to release free space in the buffer pool. Or if the page was not accepted during that certain period, it in memory. Because the page can be frequently used by another queries. Now let's take a look at the transaction ACID properties. The ACID properties are essential to be known by any DBAs. They represent key concepts around the transaction. Let's review each one now. The first one is atomicity. This property indicates that a transaction must be able to fully complete its operations. To be able to succeed, imagine that our transaction is an ATM withdrawal. Two things must happen for this transaction to complete. First, the cash has to be withdrawal, and then a debit operation must take place on the account owner. If one of these operations fails, then the transaction cannot be completed. The consistency says that a transaction could not complete if it violates the constraints or corrupt the table. Practical examples are: it from every keys are violated due to duplicate values. An attempt to insert invalid data or command size exceeded during an insert operation. The isolation is about data concurrency. The SQL Server has a mechanism to protect data such as locking and transaction isolation level. One classic example is when a transaction is doing not rations, it modifies data and exclusive lock its places and all of the users. Our process is attempting to browse or a bit of data table. May have to wait until the original transaction is complete. And finally, the durability. Every transaction must be durable, that is, it must be written in transaction log so it has the ability to throw back if necessary. Now let me finish about internal components of SQL Server architecture. Let's take a look at the versions and editions. These are the SQL Server versions currently in the market. Secret Service 7 is extremely rare, while the 2000 version, not that much, as still some legacy application runs on this platform. SQL Server 2005 to 2008 R2 are the majority in place nowadays, while the new family 2012 and 2014 are growing, and we have the SQL Server Azure, which is the platform optimized for cloud. The most common editions are Enterprise and Standard. The Enterprise is often seen in more critical environments, as this is the most complete edition and it has almost no limitations, while the Standard it's cheaper, but it has some drawbacks. If you want to know the technical specifications and limitations for each edition, best place to look use the books online from Microsoft. Now let's take a look at our first demo named 4 Steps with SQL Server. If you are already familiar with SQL Server, or if you are already DBA, you might want to skip this file. I will demonstrate some of the very basic SQL Server for those who haven't seen it yet. So this is a Windows 7 environment. Is that what we use it as a test lab for the course? I am accessing now the SQL Server Configuration Manager to verify the active services. In this case, here's my SQL Server instance name, SQL Training, Secret Service Agent, and a browser. You can see to state both a running start mode menu, meaning that a SQL Server we only started when an issue in a command to console or to the interface did log on s, which used we Account from Windows. Is controlling the SQL Server instance, in this case Nick. Is the account name that he was using it. So we gonna observed here to state start mode. Service account. And forward click here acting enter to commands. I can check and properties. Seed uses the service account mean using it's a local Windows account. Or I could use the built-in account, which is not recommended but still works. Here's the service mention which banned by that were bad the secret service installation was located. My computer name, which is in this case Nick BC. SQL Server name, the process ID on Windows. Start mode here can change, I can disable set to automatic, which is start with the Windows, and is able. Current state. Start a parameter is the more advanced that setting that we would not check now, busy used during troubleshooting on critical situations. Sometimes we need to start SQL Server with less resources, to use less memory, or to start in a single user. But is just for your awareness. For now. Took ages to view these options. I'm going to hit cancel. Here we can also have the client configuration. See actually client configuration to protocols configure. CPAP ports. But I just want to show you this interface. Just more recommended than if you use the standard services MSC Council from Windows, because this configuration manager, it only lists their services that belongs to SQL Server, not other services from Windows, so you have less chance to commit any error when dealing with this interface. Now I'm going to show you the SQL Server Management Studio. This is the initial screen that you will be prompted to choose the Windows or SQL Server authentication mode. Here we have the computer name. In this case Nick BC. And I'm choosing Windows authentication. Here's my SQL Server instance name. SQL Training. Now just hit connect. So this is the Object Explorer. I'm going to expand a little bit here to do right. Where you can also see here it's my user can plug in. That is Nick BC. Computer name. The Windows name. And here. The product version. 11.0 about 3000. That is SQL Server 2012 with Service Pack 1. This might look very simple but is useful when you are working with several instances at the same time. And connecting with different users, so you can actually see Service Pack version or to seek a server version when dealing with multiple service at the same time. These are the system databases which will be covered in Monsters for Master Model MNSDB and DDB. Now if we hit New Query. You can observe this tab here have any shows my session number, which is 57. There's another tab open. The one I'm going to close it for now. Foot click on View Properties window. It also shows the same information. It's very basic stuff. For beginners this is very useful. For you just to because whoever lack in which instance you're running the command, what is your spirit. Their server product safety. Server version. Disinformation. I have already told you the username you're connected. Windows name and SQL Server instance name. This option in the drop box here to use it to change the Congress. The database up your current session. So notice we were in master database, and here I can change like for MSTB. Or attempted V. The commands I entered here on this park on this query. They will be targeted to the database that is specified here. I can view these using his Dropbox or by command. We are going to see on the next exercise, so let me close this properties window here. And let me open the exercise on this new session I'm going to close. So if I try to give this command here, select start from DBOT, which is a system database. It's going to save invalid object name. Because stable only exists on the MSTB database. Change it from here or using this command below. Use MSTBICO will change a contest of my current session. Today MSTB database. Now the select. We work. The results. A firm metadata table that contains backup information. It's not relevant to see these columns right now. So let me erase. Here. Kennedy exercise. I'm going to go back to the master contest. Use master go. And let me select the following information. From the system.database table from the master database. He execute notice that I am only running the codes that I selected here, which is highlighted in yellow file. Just click here outside any EC, hit execute. It's going to execute whatever it's written down here, so we don't want this. I just want this piece of code. I'm going to select Acute and it will work. This is a simple display from some standard options for Davis. All the databases, system and user databases existing on my SQL Server. I'm just wanted to give you example. Offer simple terms X SQL query. Now I'm gonna open a transaction. Police city. Begin trend command. But he queued. I'm going to use them to be. Create a temporary table, name it movies. Let me expand this. There you go. Critical movies with 3 columns. Every go. And I'm going to load some data into movies. 3 moves: a Gladiator, Dark Knight and Predator, as well as the movie year. There we go, 3 heroes affected. And now I'm going to browse the data I have just inserted. Notice I'm tempted B contest. Choose where to temporary table was created, so just selected to speak. If code and this in green. The comment. So whatever I write here, it's not going to be executed. We have a movie code, movie name and launch here. And I'm going to updated data by correcting money. Small information here, the movie Predator, it's not from 1950, it's from 1987. Here's the update. 1 row affected. I'm going to browse the data again. Just this piece of code. It could not a comic, it makes no difference in the results. So here it is, I'm ordering by movie year. We have the Predator, Gladiator and Dark Knight. And then I'm going to commit this transaction. I could commit or well back, so I'm going to just commit transaction. It works. If I try to commit it again, because several tell me there's no corresponding open transaction with his request. Connections X request has no corresponding begins in section. So this is very basic stuff. But I will wanted to show you that. So if you are not aware, a possible server works the main interface that Deviate uses. This is the SQL Server Management Studio, and these were some very simple commands where we browse information, its databases, and created temporary optics, that is a table here, and inserted and updated data inside. Hope you liked this session. Thank you.